one who has served. Part 3, Past Lives. July 16, 2014. As I stated in Part 2, many Venusians, including a large contingent of my Kumara family, followed Sanat Kumara to Earth after he made the selfless pledge to bring Earth and its people back into the light after the fall of Lemuria and Atlantis. Their higher selves existing outside the bounds of time and space, the volunteers were aware that some of their numbers would be caught up in the webs of time and would remain in the incarnation cycle through the next cycle. The density upon planet Earth in the latter days of Atlantis and Lemuria was such that many of these early volunteers also fell and were caught up in the cycles of karma, until their freedom could be won again in the next golden age when the power of the light would displace that of the darkness. Some of us who came later would serve as guides for these lost ones, as well as for the ones who would become the new leaders and teachers of humanity, as the species evolved and matured. Lest you feel pity for those who fell, our souls knew what was about to happen. All volunteers were educated and trained prior to incarnating. Still, when we finally arrived through various methods, whether physical incarnation, landing on the planet via starship shuttles, or coming in as early walk-ins, it was a patent shock to our consciousness to be plunged into the density of the Earth plane. I arrived on the planet in the latter days of Lemuria. While many star seeds and light workers hold fond memories of Lemuria, it proved to be a place of horror for me. I was young, foolish, and unprepared for the intrigues of the dark ones who sought me out, attracted my light. I was beautiful, voluptuous and tall, and perhaps a bit vain, although my mother would have not said so. She was proud of her daughter. Still, in falling victim to the plots of the dark, I was following the inner command of my soul to take myself deep within humanity. There I would bide my time with my companions through time for opportunities to arise when the light would be, again, briefly transcendent during minor cycles. Prior to the fall, during the time of the great civilizations of Lemuria and Atlantis, our people served in various roles. They were teachers, priestesses, priests, shaman, teachers, engineers, inventors, artists. These talented, lighted beings also sought to hide much of the high spiritual technology used especially in the latter days of Atlantis so the knowledge would not be lost entirely. You can read about our story in the book called The Return of the Serpents of Wisdom, by Mark Amaru Pinkham, who is yet another Kumaran. Despite the power of the darkness that was spreading throughout the cultures of both great civilizations, there were places where we could live and work fairly undisturbed, so we often chose places far away from the center of activity and politics. Many of the starseed volunteers became members of groups of priests and other learned, skilled people who migrated to the outer rims of the old empire and thus escaped physical demise when the island continent was drawn down under the seas. Some of our highest teachers among us knew what was coming and felt the change as the frequency levels dropped. The most powerful ascended ones withdrew their temples and centers to the etheric realm, at a higher frequency than was available to most humans then and now. Yet, some of us remained on the planet's surface among the people to hold the light as best we could, while night descended and the world grew dark. Within the empire itself, even the outmost quiet village was affected by the wars and violence perpetrated by the aggressive sons of Belial. These interlopers sought out, attacked, or found other more subtle methods to subjugate the innocent or unwary amongst the followers of the law of the One. All the persuasive lies that these dark ones still speak even in the waning days of darkness, were used then against humanity and against those of my people who were on the planet as volunteers. I do not remember the days that I spent on Lemuria. I have been told that I had at least 2 lifetimes there, both cut off, aborted early due to trauma. After the second life, I left Lemuria and next reincarnated in the great kingdom of Atlantis. There I served as priestess in the great temples to the goddess. And in a few lifetimes, I served as a female guardian warrior for the king and queen. Before Atlantis fell, I was guided to emigrate to what is now the British Isles. I accompanied a party of priests who would become the first Druids, who would serve the indigenous people of the Isles and later waves of migrants from Europe. The Druids carried on the flame of freedom and educated many young people in the ways of the arts, sciences, government, philosophy, natural sciences, and leadership. The Druids also migrated into Europe, especially in the area once known by the Romans as Gaul, modern-day France and the lowlands. So, lifetime after lifetime, I fought, died, and was persecuted by the minions of the dark powers that reigned over the planet. Sometimes I played dark roles, as a warrior or priest, witch or warlock. Sometimes, I was the simple herbalist or healer, living on the edge of the woods, close to the people of the soil. Many such became the victims of the dark powers that ruled the imperialistic Latin Church that replaced the old religions of the city of Rome, where once the goddess was held in high regard. If you are told nowadays that the dark ones in Rome serve the goddess, those are the lies of the ones who hate her most desperately. Ever have they used the teachings and symbols of light against the followers and students of the law of the One? It is their way of twisting truth to their own purposes, using it as a weapon and a trap for those who are unwary. At other times, I lived on the great forests of North America and in the high western plateau regions where small bands followed the ebb and flow of the cycles of nature. I learned to walk quietly through the woods, to live within the rhythms of nature. A deep love for the beauty of the wild places of this planet took root in my heart, which still abides there today. Many times I was both a shaman and a warrior, depending on the need of the people. Through a series of lifetimes interwoven with the Empire of Rome, I lived and fought as a soldier, was married as a wife of a Roman general, fled the Romans when they took over Albion, only to die at the end of a short sword. I was a Druid in more than one lifetime, despised by the Romans and later by the Latin Church, but devoted to the people whom I served, taught, and healed. I lived as a solitary culti, Celtic Christianity, and spoke prayers together with my brothers and sisters on Iona, that ancient isle of the Druids, who came long ago from the remnants of Atlantis, even before she fell into the deep blue seas in storm and fire. I danced through the halls of Mughal princes and lived many lifetimes as a son or daughter of Mother India. And I walked the ancient forested paths of Japan, following the footsteps of my warrior husband, always the devoted wife, at least during one lifetime. I was a small bone temple dancer in ancient Indonesia, and traveled on elephants as an honored lord of the land. In ancient Scotland, I was a warrior king, later the daughter of an earl and wife to a respected baron in the north. I lived through part of the First War of Scottish Independence, fought against the wily tyrant King Edward I of England and Wales. Earlier still, I lived in the ancient Welsh kingdom that existed in the north of today's England, lapping over the border into the lowlands of Scotland. Little is known of this kingdom in history, but echoes of it sound through the pages of the stories of J.R.R. Tolkien about the kingdoms of the north. And I walked the moors of Scotland as a warrior of the little-known people now called the Picts. We did not paint ourselves blue, but tattoos were used to designate tribal identity. During the Dark Ages, I was scholar and soldier as a Templar knight, learning Arabic and absorbing the age-old secrets of the serpents of wisdom, which had come down through the sages of the Middle East. In an earlier age, I served in the Temple of Hathor and sailed upon the breast of the mighty Nile in flood. I have truly lived in many places, in many times, and in many guises, as both a man and woman. Many of my lives were short and ended violently. Some were long and quiet, as we are all given periods of rest so that we might absorb what has been learned before. I walked the hills and mountains of Galilee and knew the Essenes, as I was also one. Married and older, I was a cousin to Mary, and sheltered her in the early days of her pregnancy. Mary was pure and of noble blood and was married to Joseph, despite what the stories tell of her in the Bible of men. Many of those who surrounded and were a part of the life of Yeshua bar Joseph were also Kumaran. They were also highly educated individuals, well versed in the law, speaking several languages and devoted to the light. They were not the uneducated fishermen and tax collectors that the Bible of men has made them out to be. Together, as Essenes and other highly placed secret groups, we had prepared for centuries to be able to support the one who would anchor a new and potent light force upon the planet, the balanced flame of love/wisdom of the Christ. And at that particular cycle of great darkness upon the earth, the physical aspect of this great Lord of Light was only successful in holding the Christ energy within his physical vehicle for short periods of time, augmented by many supporters, seen and unseen. It would be up to others who would come later to evolve physical vessels capable of holding the light while in physical incarnation, without burning out the energy centers of the physical body. And that, dear ones, is what is happening today. Physical ascension is occurring, first in the few, and later, in the many. Many of my lifetimes were not spent in such pivotal roles, at least what I am aware of right now, but always, in whatever lifetime I found myself acting out, I retained a tie to my home. Between lifetimes, I served and learned in the great etheric retreats located upon this planet and upon Venus. I was not lost or forgotten ever during these long centuries of service. Even before this lifetime, I spent time training for my upcoming mission at the etheric retreat of Archangel Michael, located in the Rocky Mountains near Banff, Alberta, Canada. All of us who came to Earth as a Christed being have a similar story, one dedicated to service to Source through service to others. And the life prior to this one, my life was cut short. As an Englishman and highly skilled RAF bomber pilot in the early days of the war, I was shot down over France. I landed the plane, but was bleeding from wounds taken under fire. Somehow, I crawled from the plane and then fell unconscious. Waking briefly into the dark muzzle of a loaded German rifle, I died on a lonely damp field in France. In this lifetime, I met the navigator of that plane and even some of my other companions of that short lifetime, who had also died in the war and been quickly reborn. They did not remember me as in this lifetime I was a woman, but I knew them. As an aside, in this lifetime, I have been particularly fond of watching British costume dramas, of the eras of 1930 and earlier. Becoming aware of just such a clue from your own behavior might give you an indication as to where and when you lived in prior lifetimes. Keep in mind, however, that your higher selves are perfectly capable of sending aspects of self into past lives simultaneously, as time and space such as is known in the lower density worlds does not exist in quite the same way in 6D and above. So, in this lifetime of service upon this planet, I was determined to balance my karma and what I could of others, to enable those whom I came to serve to finally come into their own. When the ancient predictions from seers and prophets of the destruction of humanity around the millennia came to naught, we knew that we had passed a major milestone. Now those who sought ascension during this cycle were now set free to pursue it with all their hearts. Along with millions of other light workers volunteers from more recent waves, we had finally succeeded in anchoring the light of the Christ upon this planet. Now humanity was free to pursue their evolutionary goal of becoming a galactic civilization. And I am about to embark upon a new mission. Namaste. I am Tasjima Amaria Kumara. This story will conclude with Part 4, A New Mission. Channeled by Elizabeth Erzesher. BlueDragonJournal.com